Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our afternoon sessions. We'll get Tiff's running around closing the door. So first session of the afternoon, our 1:30 session is Jane Nguyen, who also happens to be our boss. This isn't awkward at all. And it's called How to Build and Be Part of High-Performing Teams. And I'm part of her team. So there you go. I'll pass it to Jane.
You'll be called on later. Thanks, Simone. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming post-lunch. I'm hoping that this will keep you awake. Nobody likes a post-lunch slump, but I won't get offended if you take a nap, so don't worry about it. I have not timed this talk at all, so we're going to go at a normal person's pace all the way until the 5-minute warning, and then we're going to basically talk like I'm on speed. So if you have any questions, let me know. Feel free to interrupt during the session. There'll definitely be time at the end for questions, but if you do have questions, put your hand up so Tiff or Simone, but probably Tiff, will be coming around with microphones. All right, so this is my talk, is how to be part of a high-performing team, and it really doesn't matter whether you're trying to build one from scratch or whether you're just trying to participate in one or you've joined one and you don't know how to be part of one. Sounds strange, but we'll go through a lot of examples, hopefully very practical for everybody. I also don't know how to use a clicker very well, so if this doesn't work, I'm just putting it out there. So when we think about high-performing teams, I think most people probably think that most of the work and the teams that they work in are pretty good, right? You come to work, you enjoy your work, you're pretty pleasant, you get your job done and you go home. But here are some of the things that you might notice in some of the teams if you reflect on that indicate maybe not everything is as good as it could be. So some of the big ones over here on the left, which is weird because I'm looking at the wrong spot, but that's cool. On the left is, has anybody ever been in a team meeting and everybody's like, you know, you're kind of like having a normal conversation, but then everybody leaves the conversation and there's a small group of you trying to figure out what the fuck happened? Yeah, okay. And that's fine, because every now and then that happens. But if it happens all the time, you might not be in a high-performing team, right? Has anybody ever been in a room with all of these people, we're all trying to make a decision, and everybody says, is everybody clear? And everybody says, yes, we're all clear. And everybody walks out of the room, and everybody's like, what the fuck are we doing? You know, it turns out I lied to Simone earlier, and there are plenty of F-bombs in here. Right? Okay, so this is about clarity, understanding, and again, that happens all the time, but the real question you should be asking is, why didn't you say that in the room? Not that there's lack of clarity. So these are some of the things that might indicate that you are just not in a high-performing team. And the last one is actually really interesting because it's about being distracted by the wrong things. It's about the whole team not growing, right, and not moving forward. So you're kind of like in this Groundhog Day, just doing the same things over and over again. So if you've got something like that going on in your life, it's probably not a high-performing team, but it's not all bad news. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to come out of this book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I strongly recommend you read it. Pat Lencioni has done a really, really good job. It's an old book, so these concepts are actually very, very old. This is not new, and it's actually really, really easy to follow. And if you don't like reading, like me, there's a manga version. So yeah, it's really, really helpful. And if you don't want to read that, there's actually the skip ahead version called Overcoming the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So perfect. So there's plenty of material around this stuff. All right, so this is the pyramid. This is the pyramid of the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And the first layer is probably the hardest layer, which is absence of trust. The next one is fear of conflict, lack of commitment, not shared accountability, and inattention to results. So I'm going to go through each of these in relative detail. Again, the first two will probably get a lot of detail, and the last three we're going to zip through like you're on a zip line. So let's start here. So the way to manage absence of trust is to lead with openness and vulnerability. But before we get there, you have to understand what trust means. So we all know what absence of trust can do. Absence of trust is actually very easy. So trust is very easy to break, very hard to build, very easy to break. You already know this. This is not new. And it doesn't take much to break trust. Not showing up when you said you were going to show up, being late, not delivering. Literally, little things and big things contribute to the absence of trust. But what are we really talking about when we talk about trust? I am not talking about the large, sweeping, I trust you with my dogs and my house and my children trust. That is not the trust I'm talking about, right? I am talking about this. This is from a guy called Charles Feltman. He also has a very good book about this sort of thinking in corporate environments. So trust is defined as choosing to risk making something of value to me to another person's actions. This is important. The thing that's of value to me could be anything. It could be my work. It could be my reputation. It could be one of my team doing my talk, right? It could be anything. It could be big and it could be little. But if I can't trust you with it, then I won't give you something else to do. If I can't trust you with that, then we probably can't move up the pyramid, right? Does that make sense? So this is really important to define when we're talking about high-performing teams, is how we're going to build trust. And we talk about it in our team all the time, which is, do you have my back? If I need you and I call you, will you help me? Now, there's a lot of things around that, obviously, if you don't have capacity and all the right constraints. But if you say you're going to help me and you show up, this is important. Okay, so this takes us to the wrong slide. Excellent. I don't know what that's doing there, but we might have to come back to it. So this takes us to the trust equation. Has anybody seen this before? Okay, so this is the trust equation. Trust, it turns out, is easy to figure out and build if you have an equation to follow. It's not nebulous. So the first thing on the trust equation is about credibility. Can I trust what you're saying? Is what you're saying reasonable based on the context that we're in? Are you reliable? Reliable isn't just like that you can do the thing, but the thing is that I want you to do the thing every time I ask you to do the thing. Whatever the thing is, that I can continue to call on you. Intimacy is a strange word, yes, but not intimacy, again, not in the intimacy in the personal world. Intimacy is, can I trust you to tell me the truth? Can I trust you to be vulnerable with me? Right? Can I trust you to share your feelings or your fears or your concerns? And self-orientation is probably it's just a whole nother thing. Is why are you here? Are you here for me or are you here for you? Right? All of these things make up the trust equation. And every part of this means that every time you do something for somebody helps either build or take away from trust. Does that make sense? Cool. So there's a whole bunch of different ways we're going to go through this, but ultimately you have to find ways to build trust in your team using the trust equation. So the thing is, the last thing on trust, because it's a big thing. I like to, just in case you're wondering, I like to really steal quotes from people. This is obviously none of my work here. So Simon Sinek says, we don't build trust by offering help. We build trust by asking for it. So think really hard about a team that you've been working in, and when people are really struggling, are they willing to ask for help? That will be a key indicator of the kind of trust you have in the team, right? Yes.
Ironically, there's a couple of different points there. Brené Brown talks about the fact that we think of vulnerability in asking for help. We think of it as weakness when we're asking, but when someone asks us for help, we think of it as being courageous.
I'm going to literally ask you to repeat that now. Sorry.
So, yeah, Brené Brown sort of talks about that element of asking for help and saying that when we ask for help, we think we're being weak, but when someone else asks us for help, we think they're being courageous. So vulnerability is actually really courage. So that asking for help is a really important component.
Thank you. And thank you for repeating it. And then the second thing is, trust is not built in big, sweeping moments. It's built in tiny, everyday moments. I talk about this with my team all the time. We talk about what's called the credit debit system. So if you show up at my birthday once a year and that's the only time I see you, the chances of me calling you when I'm sick are really, really small, right? Unless I've known you for 100 years, and there's only 2 people that I would do that with. But if you show up all the time at random, ad hoc, and we're just kind of those kinds of friends, I'm very likely to call you, even though it's ad hoc and a bit random. Does that make sense? Resonate? Great. All right, so that's trust really quickly. So here are some practical things that people can do to get to trust. So firstly, don't forget that trust is as easily broken. It's probably faster to break than it is to make, right? Very fast. So it takes one little thing. But regardless of the role that you're in, regardless of the team that you're working in, remember the trust equation. This matters. Build relationships with individuals as well as a team. So I guess the way that I would think about that is the strength of the node is the strength of the team, right? So if you have a team of 4 people and I am connected to 3 people and those people are not connected, I am the strongest node in the team. That is not a strong team. Each team member and each node should be well connected to the other team members, certainly in a small team. Obviously, practically, when you get a bigger team, it's not quite as easy. But what you end up relying on is what we call anchors, anchor nodes. So the bigger nodes should be connected to the smaller nodes and smaller nodes are connected to bigger nodes, right? So there's a whole theory on that. But that is really, really important. You have to put quite a lot of work into one-on-one as well as a team. Set clear expectations on how to work with me. This is probably a big thing. I feel like a lot of you probably would have just come out of the social contract chat, right? But this is a lot of it, right? How to work with me, what are my boundaries, and what are our ways of working? I think this is important specifically for people who are different to the other people in the team. Different being any kind of different. Different in our world is you are a designer and they are engineers. They work differently to you. They speak differently to you. Make it explicit, right? For me, I am audio and visual. I am mildly dyslexic. People who paste lots and lots of words to me need to give me a summary. I cannot read it. It will take a long time, especially if you need me to make a decision at the end, right? So ask at the beginning what you need from me. Tell me what the detail is. I'll go find where it is. So I make that explicit to new members of my team. Learn each other's strengths and how to use them. I really recommend, look, I really like Strengths Finders and Human Synergistics. I've qualified in both of these. It gives really good language to how to complement each other and their strengths, people and their strengths. You don't have to be good at everything. You actually don't. And sometimes people are just going to be better at the thing that you're good at regardless, right? Like that's life. But now what you have to do is figure out how to work together, right? Like what is it that you're going to bring to the table? Because you have something to bring to the table. And practice feedback. So this is going to be another common theme that we'll go through. But 360 feedback is important. So as a leader, you need to create an environment that allows people to do 360 feedback, right? That means feedback up and down, not just down. Sideways too. You need to role model this openness and vulnerability. I was just saying to someone before, making mistakes like that with my slides is part of what I do for my team. And I certainly didn't do that on purpose, but it's really fine, right? It's really fine. Well, at least I think it's fine. And vulnerability, again, when we think about what are we trying to share, there are boundaries. This is still a work context. We're not trying to be the best of friends. I'm not trying to take over your life. But being vulnerable to the fact that you're afraid that you can't do something, that you're going to be judged, that maybe you're not competent, these are the things that we need to be vulnerable about. And encourage by showing first. So every leader in this room, which will be all of you, needs to feel comfortable with being first if the room is silent. So lead by example. Any questions on absence of trust or how to get to openness and vulnerability? Like, so easy. So easy. Awesome. All right. So the next one is fear of conflict. And you can, if you haven't followed the pyramid before, you have to go up the pyramid. It's necessary and mandatory. So you can imagine that if you have an absence of trust, that you will have a fear of conflict. Because if you don't trust the person that you're speaking to, you're certainly not going to give them some sort of negative or constructive feedback on their idea, certainly not in a public forum. So this becomes a problem when people table dumb ideas, right? And they do, right? Because we're encouraging that too. So what does that mean? We're like, what? So obviously, building trust makes it easy to tell somebody, I don't understand your idea, right? I was like, what? And there's obviously really logical ways to say, what the fuck are you talking about, without publicly shaming a person. So obviously discretion, please use. But if you don't feel comfortable sitting in a meeting, bandying around, certainly in some of my team meetings, we're like, okay, what are we going to do about X? And people table ideas. There is no dumb idea. You have to feel comfortable tabling them, but you also have to feel comfortable saying to that person, I don't understand. Can you help me understand? Like, how does this work, right? Like, that's fine. Now, let's see if the slide is in the right spot. It is not in the right spot. All right, now we have to go back and find the slide. Apologies. Here we go. Okay, so this is the continuum of conflict. I think most people think that conflict is this, right? And therefore not conflict is this, which is artificial harmony versus personal attacks. Not all conflict is personal attacks. In fact, most conflict should not be personal attacks. And not saying something is not harmony, right? That's quite frankly disgruntlement and resentment, which is what we'll talk about later. So what we want to do is look for this kind of nice, we want to work on this continuum and find that happy place in the middle. Makes sense, right? So I think we do that by starting with feedback, which now we have to jump ahead, sorry. This is what happens when you do your slides at like 10:30 at night. All right, so the first thing that people worry about with feedback is this statement, which I think is very true and people don't think about. Feedback sometimes says something about the receiver, but always says something about the giver. Okay, now what that means is if you are making comments about a conflict in a moment of anger, that says a lot about you and nothing about the person that you're giving that to. So feedback has to be timed and be very deliberate, in my opinion. But this is what people are worried about. With that statement, I think quite a lot of people, including people in my team, might be worried that, oh my God, every time I give feedback, they're going to judge me. Yes, but not exactly, right? Okay, why would we give feedback and why is that not exactly true? So now I'm going to tell you a story. Let's paint this picture. You and your partner of choice have decided to go learn dancing, and you do your first couple of dance lessons and your partner is surprisingly awful, steps on your feet all the time and also has no rhythm. Okay, so you have a couple of options. You can just tell them and you can give them this feedback, but you're really worried about hurting their feelings. You're really worried that they might take it personally. Really work because you know that they're trying hard, right? You know that they're trying really hard and it's fine. And you're not very good either. So like, what difference does it make? It'll be fine. You'll probably figure it out in the next couple of lessons. So you give it another couple of lessons and it turns out they're not very good. They're not getting any better, but neither are you. So now you have a couple of choices. You can tell the person, your partner, maybe we could work on something different. But again, you're still a bit afraid because you're worried about the personal attack thing. What if you just start moving your feet out of the way, right? Like while you're dancing, now you can figure out when they're going to step on your feet. You could just like, that's what I do with my dog, by the way. So right, like we could play tiptoes here. Or you could just go buy new shoes that have steel caps in them. What have you done in this situation to make it better? Literally nothing. Yes, correct, right? Like artificial harmony. So, but what has happened to your partner in this situation? Thinks they're great. This is so much fun, right? So they have not improved one iota. So the intent behind feedback isn't about conflict and it's not about personal attacks. It's about helping people improve. And if you're willing to help improve because you're willing to give yourself a little bit of vulnerability to a person in your team, you're effectively building trust and helping them get better and helping you get better. But if you don't and you do nothing, you just go get new shoes, you both end up shit still. Or really magic if there are like lots of tippy-toey fast feed things. But now we're really going to zip through it because that was the 5-minute warning. But those two are the biggest parts of the pyramid. So the thing I really recommend is practicing microfeedback. Start small. Don't panic. Practice with positive and constructive feedback. Keep it concise. Start with really low risk, dumb shit. Because like, it shouldn't matter if the coffee was cold, right? Like, it really shouldn't. Give real-time permission. Hey, I know that was a bit weird. Can you give me some feedback, right? Clarify acceptable behavior, obviously. Don't yell at people. Don't bounce on the table. All of that stuff. And follow up just to make sure the person's okay. Again, small interactions build trust, not big ones. As a leader, you need to build an environment that gets you through that promotes healthy conflict. You need to focus on the ideas and not the personalities. And you need to start with what you like and not start tearing things down. Seems easy. I really recommend these two books. Again, they're very, very old. Crucial Conversations and Crucial Confrontations really talks to how to structure these kinds of conflicts from small team all the way through to UN conversations. So if you think you are alone, you are not. All right, we're going to get 4 minutes of 1 minute each for the rest of the slides. Great. So, but to be honest, now things are easy. It turns out when you can trust each other and talk about things that you don't understand as a team, getting commitment, clarity, and closure is really, really easy, right? So I won't go through this, but basically, healthy conflict is normal as long as you can talk about it. This is how you get clarity. So the trust equation is literally, hey, I don't really understand what you're saying. I know you mean well. Please explain to me again. And I know that you do this every time, but I still don't understand, right? And the person's patience is going to be really, really helpful. So use the trust equation through getting clarity. Probably the most important thing about getting clarity, a lot of people talk about consensus. I am not a fan of consensus at all, but this is the idea versus the buy-in. So what you do need to do is table as many ideas as you can, including shitty ones. But what you want is as equal buy-in as you do number of ideas or the idea that you've got. What we're saying is we're inviting everybody to have an opinion first before we figure out what we're going to do. This helps people buy into the idea because they were part of the creation. This is like, you guys know this for your living. This is what we do in co-creation. So teams and people, turns out, no different whatsoever. So when I talk about ways of working, the whole team should come up with that so that the whole team can buy into it. The hardest thing for a leader to do is to role model all of these. It's really hard not to just make all the decisions and to tell people to trust you, you know what you're doing. Nobody knows my whole team knows. No, I don't know what I'm doing. But you've got to drive these activities. All right, now we're moving to avoidance of accountability and high standards, which is tenuous. I'm going to skip slide with lots of text because I'm me. The biggest thing of accountability, if you don't get buy-in, it's very easy to say it wasn't my fault. So if you don't get consent in the room, when you leave the room, it's very easy for me to say, well, I actually didn't agree with that. I just don't want to say anything in the room. That happens all the time. And when shit hits the fan, this is the thing about people who want accountability. When shit hits the fan, that's what accountability is. And what a good high-performing team says is, we made that decision. We don't know why that went wrong. Let's go figure it out. Not you made that decision. Go figure it out. Big difference. Again, trust, conflict, clarity. Now we're in it together. All right. How am I going? I've got like 2 minutes left. Yep, one. Well, this one's easy. This one is about self-orientation. How do you get a high-performing team to focus on the results and not the individuals? Who knows who these two people are? Great. Who watched the Hungary race this year? Great. What happened? Actually, I'll tell you because we've got 5 minutes. But basically, Lando Norris is driver number 1. Oscar Piastri is driver number 2. Team orders hit. Oscar Piastri was asked to do something for his teammate, and his teammate did not reply in kind for a very uncomfortable period of time. He did not put his team first. What seemed like that he was going to be selfish to win the race. Now, he chose the last literal minute to make that difference, to make that choice. He was very clearly unhappy about it. But honestly, as a team, they are better for it because they've been reaping the rewards, unlike some of the other teams like Ferrari and Mercedes, where that is very clearly not happening. So this is about team over self. And sometimes it sucks, but you still have to do it. All right, we don't have time for a recap. Sorry, guys. That's the end.